All right, I think we're live.
We are live. Um,
Sure.
okay, I guess I'm the one doing the intro since Benson's not here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. As you can see, Sean Benson isn't here tonight, and it's always the same reason with that guy. He got another movie gig, so he's off doing another movie. He's up in Ottawa, and we're always really happy for him because, in the entertainment industry, nothing is ever guaranteed. And he has a really great track record of just doing good stuff, taking a little break, and then working again. And if you don't know who Sean Benson is, other than from his illustrious career on Punch Kick Choke Chat, um, you should IMDb him and you'll see that you've actually seen him in so much stuff that you never realized that you saw him in. But thanks for joining tonight. And if you're joining live on Zoom or on YouTube or listening to us, you can send in some questions to us. And if for Coach Ellis, and if they're not bad, then we'll ask him the questions, and if they are bad, then they won't get past me or or our guests. If you're watching this later or listening to it on one of the podcast platforms, we always appreciate it if you can give us a thumbs up, a like, a comment. Even if the comment is negative, we don't care because it just helps with the algorithm. You can put your negative comments in there. I can't promise we'll even read them, but we still want them. So I'm here tonight with two of my instructors. I'm joined by my senseis, Sensei Gary Legacy and Sensei Nicholas Swino, and they've been my teachers respectively for 37 years and 34 years. Uh, so we've had a good long run together, and I'm looking forward to a much longer run. And 2026 has started with a bang for us. So we've had a couple of big events ourselves. We did our practical fighting seminar in January. We had like 60 people at that. Uh, we did the Matsumora Challenge karate tournament. We had about 300 competitors, and there was probably like 700 people in the room there. And then in less than a week, we're going to have our Iaido camp. And we're banging up on 50 people for that Iaido camp, which is great. Um, and our guest tonight is a return guest. It's Coach Rick Ellis. He's a third degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was looking at things, and it's 2 years ago since you were on the show, Coach. It was March 7th, 2024 that you were on, and
Wow.
it's March 5th, 2026 today. So it's been 2 years, and we've had lots of little interactions, but since then, mostly online. We're really stoked to have you back on. And we like to start, we've maybe have changed some things since you're here. So we start with an out of the gate question for the guest right away, and then we'll do your intro after that, Coach. So you have this new book. It's called The Old Grappler's Handbook, and it's a great book. I'm consuming it audibly, and I've already consumed it 3 times in a row, like just in succession. It's a really good book. If you haven't gotten it, I would encourage people to get it. And I'm the only one on the call who's not an author. Sense Legacy has written a book and is in the midst of doing a second book. And Census Funerals wrote like one or two or 20 books now. I think he's up to 20. Had 20 books. But for you, Coach Ellis, what we want to come out of the gate with and ask, why did you decide to write that book, The Old Grappler's Handbook? And why did you choose that topic? What was it about old grapplers that made you want to actually write an entire great book on it?
Well, have you looked at me lately? This has been kind of thrust upon me. I started jujitsu way too late in life and got obsessed with it. And my first decade of training jujitsu, I pushed way too hard. I got injured a lot. You have to learn all the lessons. Nobody can tell you anything really. You have to learn all those lessons about ego management, lessons about pacing, all the things. And and more recently, I've had this idea for this book for actually quite a while now. And initially, I thought I'm just going to write a little PDF, a little download with some things that I think are important when you're older. But I started actually sketching it out a little bit, writing, a table of contents, just, what's going to be in the book. And I realized that I had like 30 chapters worth of stuff. It ended up being 22 chapters, I think, is what we ended up with for the book. So that way too much for a downloadable PDF. and I had a hole in my schedule for the first time in a while. And I had a little bit of a neck injury, so I had to take some time off training. And I thought, maybe this is the time. And I'm a little OCD. When I get into things, I tend to just really get into it. So from the first thing in the morning, when I got up till it was time to bed, I spent 3 months just writing and writing and writing and writing. And I got it done. I got it published. It's on all the formats. And then I did the audiobook myself. And what was funny is it took me 3 days to read it. And I have a standing desk. I pulled the desk up. I put some pillows around the microphone. I wanted a little sound isolation. And so I just was frozen standing there for 3 days straight. And the third day, my girlfriend comes home. She's a physical therapist, and she looks at my feet. She goes, "Why are your feet swollen?" I had literally not moved for 3 days straight, standing there narrating this dumb book. So,
You,
but
you
yeah,
know what though? I'm really happy that you narrated the book yourself. I just want to throw out a plug to you for that because a lot of times when you consume people's material, they get some other person to read it. And I really consume a lot of your material on YouTube as well. So it just made it for me seem really familiar.
yeah.
Like you were just, I was listening to the book and listening to you talk, and it was like you were telling me the lessons. And it was like, oh, I'm just driving in my car here with Coach Ellis, and he's telling me all this stuff about being an old grappler. Right? So, which,
What's funny is I thought I was going to use AI to read it, and so I gave it like 2 hours of me speaking to train it, and then I gave it a sample chapter, and it was pretty good. In it can kind of fake you for a little bit. It can trick you for a little bit, but then as you're listening, you're like, "Ah, this is not quite right. Not quite. No, okay, I'm going to have to do this myself." So I'm glad I did it.
well, good for you for doing it. So I'm going to come back to you because I have a couple other questions for you about,
Mm.
about your book. But I want to just go because we have other authors on the call, and I want to ask Sense of Legacy why you wrote the book. I think it's actually over my shoulder there. The Practical Fighter. How did you choose that topic, and why did you write that book?
Uh, well, uh, I'm probably the least educated person here. I just want to say that. I it was, you know, very well that I had no intention of doing that, but you were at my place one time and you picked up a book where I kept all my notes and going to my senseis and everything, and you wanted to read it, so you read it, and you said, you should make a book out of this. So after just writing everything down and trying to get it together. And then thanks to you and Derek Latimer, who's a university teacher, helped me along with with everything and the drawings and everything. And I just wanted to try to explain some of the basics of real Okinawan and classical karate, and zeroed in on the fighting aspect. So I just worked away at it for about a year or so, and then finally had the nerve to put it together. I mean, it wasn't all that complicated for me because I had a lot of help.
Well, it's been well received, Sensei. Sensei Suino, how did you choose your 20 topics for titles? Um, and I guess like your most prolific book is obviously the your Isshin Ryu Iaido manual, which I think you actually caught some shit for that one too, right?
Yeah.
But how did you choose the topics and why did you choose them and what was your process in writing these things?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure my experience was a little different because, I was an English major in college, and then I got a master's in fine arts and writing. So I had written a bunch of two novels and I don't know, a dozen short stories. Um, and I remember, after grad school, sending out, I can't remember. I always joke that it was at least 100 letters to publishers saying, "Do you want my short story? Do you want my novel? And just getting no, 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 not right for us right now. Over, you're a very good writer, but we don't want your stuff. Um, and then I went to Tokyo and lived for 4 years and trained. Then when I got back, I wanted to memorialize all the stuff I had learned in Iaido, right? I wanted to make a manual really for myself. Um, so I wrote it and I had a chapter and some illustrations and I sent it to three publishers and all three publishers wanted it. And it was just jaw-dropping, the difference in trying to write fiction and uh, and trying to write a martial arts manual. And so I had several publishers arguing about it, and eventually I went with Weatherhill. But the whole point of writing that book was really for me to capture the things I had learned while I was training in Japan, not forget them. And then kind of like, Rick, kind of like you, as I wrote it, I just started realizing there was a little more detail I had to put in, some history and so forth. But really, it's a simple manual, but still my best-selling book by tenfold compared to any other book I've written.
Thanks.
Well, can I say something here?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably because of your abilities in the art, because they probably most people didn't just go and buy it. They probably trained with you and
Mhm.
realized that you were the real thing, and then they were interested in the art.
Well, the word gets out, right? I mean, it's if you're lucky enough to get a little bit of notoriety, it really helps with book sales.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
was surprised at how few books you have to sell these days to be a bestseller.
yeah.
Honestly, I was surprised because, the recommendation is you try to pick some categories that are not real competitive. And I ended up being top of three different categories: sports psychology, martial arts, and um, I think uh, fitness for the aging or something like that, some
Nice.
odd that. So I was like, oh, great, I can call myself a best-selling author. But if you saw how few books I'm really selling, it seems what I realize is that nobody reads. I think we live in a post-literate world because nobody seems to read as much, probably.
That's so true. It's funny. When I first wrote Art of Japanese Swordsmanship and got it published, this is in the old-fashioned days of like, old big publishers and all that, and I got my first royalty check. It was a very different day and age. It was a lot of money for me in those days, and I got on the horn with my publisher and I said, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to move some things around in my life because I'm going to have all this income." And he's like, "Wait a minute. No, whatever you do, don't do that because it's not going to be like this." And, sure enough, the
Right.
sales dropped. And these days, as you noted, book sales ain't what they used to be.
Mhm.
Well, I want to say I'm a voracious reader. Uh, and I've usually got two or three books on the go, which is the case this time. And I try and have like one physical book that I'm reading and an audio book that so when I'm in my truck moving around, I'm still consuming material. And my intention, Coach Ellis, is to actually get your a physical copy of your book because
Mhm.
eventually when I come to the Old Man Grappler Summit, I want to get an autograph and a picture of you with it. So, and on that note, I want to do the introduction because then I have some more
Mhm.
questions for you about the book. So, our guest tonight is BJJ Black Belt Coach Rick Ellis. Um, as I said, he was last on our podcast exactly 2 years ago. It was March 7th, 2024, when he joined us last time. Coach Ellis trains underneath legendary BJJ instructor Roy Dean, who's another one. If you go on YouTube, you can find lots of good content from Professor Dean. He
Mhm.
loves nothing more than the spark of a new idea brought to fruition. And he's done a lot of that, especially his books, his podcast, his events. Um, and he likes those most if they require deep immersion. And I
Mhm.
find him and Setsuno to be very similar in that ilk, uh, deep immersion events and things. Coach was a guitarist in a rock band called Nix that played clubs on the Sunset Strip in LA. As well, he sang and played guitar in a cover band called 50/50 at a bar in Cancun, Mexico for 3 years. And that's where he's very similar to Sean Benson, who's also a musician and does that kind of stuff. You maybe should become the co-host on this show, Coach Ellis. When one of us can't be here, you should join us because you fit in so well. Um, He was also a music engineer and sound designer for film and television, and he worked on over 300 projects in Los Angeles, Europe, and Japan on shows like Toy Story and Pocahontas. And his team actually won an Emmy for their work on Oliver Stone's film Assassinated: The Last Days of Kennedy and King. As mentioned, Coach is a black belt under Professor Roy Dean, and of all the accomplishments, he's proudest of that one because it required the most dedication. And it was the hardest one, 14 years to get his black belt, and it was made a little bit harder by the fact that he was an older athlete when he started it. He had a jiu-jitsu school in Wyoming. I love that state, by the way. I'll be going back again for the fifth time this summer with Suino
Mm,
Sensei. Um,
mm,
and if you've never seen his podcast, The Art of Skill, it's on YouTube and it's really good. Even if you don't do BJJ and you do some other martial art, it's a really good podcast for you to check out because it's not just always geared towards BJJ. A lot of the philosophies will help you in any martial art that you're doing. Um, and he travels and teaches. He's the creator of the Old Grappler Summit. It's a BJJ event tailored towards the more vintage athletes. And I always like to provide a few thoughts. As I mentioned, I love his content. It has really high production value. It's really educational and it's super easy to consume. Um, his book is great. I don't know if I said it at the beginning, but I've gone through it 3 times now, and I intend to go through it again. He just has a really great way of explaining the hows and whys, and wraps it all up with some really good philosophy. Um, and another thing that I really respect about Coach Ellis is he's open to changing his thoughts and opinions. If you watch some early podcasts and then you watch other podcasts, he changes his mind on things, and I really respect that. Some
mm,
people are they become very doggish about what they're thinking and they just won't change. And I've often heard him say things like, I used to think, but now I think.
mm,
Um,
mm.
and on that note, he is a very deep thinker. He scaffolds his thinking the same way he does his techniques. And Coach Ellis, thanks for coming on here again tonight. And it's we're gonna have a good discussion. I know that we are. Um, so I'd like to get back to your book
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Y- Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Like I mentioned before you hit the record button, you guys are the smart podcast. So I was a little nervous coming on thinking, what are they going to ask me? I may not be smart enough for this one, but I appreciate you guys bringing me back.
Yeah, anytime. It's always a good conversation. So getting back to your book, The Old Grappler's Handbook, I just like to know, it's always nice for you to shine the light on some other people. So who helped you with that book? Did you have people in the background helping you and maybe share some of the acknowledgments that you'd like to share for people? Or if it's like, nope, I stood by myself for like 10 days and nobody helped me.
Yeah. Well, it was totally a solo effort, but like all of us in the martial arts or in anything, we're standing on the shoulders of those that came before us. And a lot of the way that I think about jujitsu philosophically was inspired by my coaches and my teachers. And primary among those has been Roy Dean. And he and I, we became very close friends early on. I was one of his first students when he opened his school in Wyoming or in Oregon when I was living out there. And he and I would have these discussions, at my house or his house. We were always talking jujitsu philosophy. And that I think sort of kindled that spark in me to think a little more deeply about what it is we're doing because it's not just choking people and trying to snap their joints. There's some deeper lessons embedded within this thing that we do.
100%. What was the hardest part about writing the book? Was there any sticky spots? Like I often talk to Sean Benson about his writing, and he sometimes has to go, like he has to change his environment totally, to be creative and write. And did you have any hard
I,
spots where you
I'm,
got stuck?
you know, yeah, the whole thing was a bit of a slog. I gave myself a finite window to do it. I had 3 months to get it done. And so I just obsessed. And so I didn't have time to really, even think about what are the sticky spots, what are this. I just had to keep plowing forward and getting it done. And I just did. So, um, yeah, that's how I'd answer that.
Okay. And you mentioned that you've hit the top in a couple of things, but it'd be nice to hear what kind of feedback are you getting from people besides me? Like, so you got one testimonial right now,
Yeah.
but like, what are you hearing from the rest of the community?
I've been surprised. I've gotten, I think we're up to like 32 five-star reviews on the book, which surprised me. I thought, okay, I'll get a few of, my die-hard fans or the super fans. I'm sure I'll get it, or my friends. And sure enough, yeah, they contributed, but I've been surprised, and the response has been very good. Some people say this is good advice for people of any age. He's targeting it toward the over 40 crowd. But what he describes is just good jujitsu, good martial arts, good, a good approach to that that works even when you're young. When you're young, you tend to rely more on your physical attributes because they're there, but those things will start to fail you. And if you don't begin thinking about how to train, how to perform when you don't have those attributes, then you're going to hit a wall at some point.
Yeah. One thing I'll share with you, Coach Ellis, when I was consuming it, there was a lot of things that I learned, but then there was a lot of things that were reinforced for me that I was already kind of doing. And I was like, this is awesome. Okay, I'm on the right track here. I'm not an island unto myself. Um, because, I started martial arts when I was 18 years old, but I didn't with Sense Legacy, and I'm primarily been doing karate my whole life. But then one or two of my students started doing BJJ, and they dragged me in when I was 50, and that's when I started that. And so a lot of the stuff I was reading about, like, you can't have it all, you have to pick this, and this. I was like, it's so awesome to hear that because I change it sometimes, but yeah, I'm not always doing everything all the time because I just can't now. Um, like,
It, it's
training with the younger guys, like it's good to roll with them, but I remember in the book you said, just surviving around sometimes with those people is a win. And I
Mhm.
came to that understanding I was like, look at this young monster. He's like 26 years old. He's, 60 pounds heavier than me. And he's already higher ranking than me. The chances of me being able to actually submit him within this rule set is like zero. So how do I just keep myself safe and live through
Yeah.
this next 5 or 6 minutes?
And redefine what success means, which is a chapter in the book. What is success? Is it that you're dominating the room, you're tapping everybody out? Well, over the age of 50, that's not reality. That's just not reality. You can improve technically year after year. You can get much more skilled. You can develop incredible skill, and eventually that skill will let you be very successful, even though you don't have the attributes. But you still have to redefine what success is. And success might mean I went to class, I didn't get hurt, I survived, I'm a little better today, and that's good enough. Or success is I lasted a little longer. That guy that always taps me out, I lasted longer this time. Or, there's a million ways to find positive things about this game that we're doing. But I think you have to, because otherwise, you're just not going to feel that good about yourself because there's so much failure that unless you find the positives within that, then it just turns into kind of a grind.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing that you said in the book that I think is a valuable lesson for whether you're old or young is when you said, the person who trains at that 60 to 70% level, but they don't ever miss classes and they're more consistent and they come all the time, is always going to win out and get better over a person who redlines themselves at 90 and is injured and misses training all the time.
Yeah. Consistency versus intensity. And listen, I like pushing hard when I'm in shape. I like to push hard. We all like to push hard. And I make the case in the book that when you push really hard, it feels more productive. It feels like you have done real work. It feels like you've gotten better. You leave the academy just depleted. And I've made this joke before, hoping you don't get mugged on the way to the car because you got nothing left after training. But if that's your default setting, it means that your recovery is going to be much more difficult. You're not going to be able to train as often. It means that you are flirting with injury a lot more, or those lingering aches and pains that accumulate over time, and maybe they become something, maybe they don't, but you have to deal with them. And so it's much better to just dial down the intensity, which is tough. You know, we're all competitive. We all have egos. But if you can find that sweet spot where you're training just hard enough, but not so hard that you're killing your ability to recover and come back tomorrow, and that consistency will pay dividends uh, far more than the intensity. And look, it's a martial art. I get it. You know, it's a fighting art. Sometimes we do have to push ourselves. We have to be able to sharpen that knife when we need to. But the point I make in the book is it just can't be the default setting.
What do you think of this? It seems to me it's not only safer and allows you to be consistent over the long term, but I think you have different lessons that come out of that kind of training,
Mm.
right? That there's times when you're trying to learn dexterity or you're trying to program a move into your set or have a different way of thinking or change your observation when you're training. Training hard a lot of times involves tunnel vision, right? Excessive muscular contractions, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that side of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is, how do we develop skill in martial arts or really any domain, right? You go to a piano teacher, does he put the metronome at concert tempo and say, here you go? Well, no, you have to start very, very slow and build up those mechanics. And it's difficult. The piano doesn't fight back. You know, you go to jujitsu and your opponent is fighting back, and the temptation is to match that because, especially when you're new in the arts, there's no pathway to success except for more intensity, right? And until you have enough technical skill. And so the temptation is just sort of match that. But skill acquisition requires you to dial it down so that you can program those movement patterns into your body and hold those windows of opportunity open longer. At full intensity, the windows are very, very small. You're operating on, you're required to have incredible timing so you can operate within these tiny windows, which means that at full intensity, all you can do is play your A game. You can't play anything else. Well, you're reinforcing patterns that you've already established, patterns that you've been reinforcing. You're not adding new components to your game. You're not exploring. I've always had a very sort of explorational approach to jujitsu. I get bored with techniques. Once I start mastering a certain technique, I'll be like, okay, that's good. I got that. What's next? And so dialing it down sort of lets you be a little more explorational in the way you go about it. But that's a very astute point, Nick, about trying to we're developing mechanics here. How do we develop that? Well, you have to do it at a pace that allows you to do that.
I think you have also just produced a quote for the ages here on Punch Kick Choke Chat. You said the piano doesn't fight back.
I think when
Very
you
true.
train at that level too, I'd be interested if you feel this way, any of you. I think you actually can develop a better relationship with your training partner than when you're just going at like 90. It's really hard to actually like you're just so focused on yourself then. You can't even really like I sometimes if I'm going like that hard, I don't develop that good relationship with them. When we're going at that 60% pace and you're done, it's easy to look at them and go, man, you set that Kimura grip up really good and the sweep was set up really good. And you can actually compliment them and appreciate their game a lot more than when you're just
Yeah.
fighting to dominate or survive.
Well, and it takes two to do that. The challenge is that not everybody can dial that intensity down. And that's ego management and all those things.
Yeah,
Uh,
you do a good job of addressing that in the book though, right? Like just let them do it. Just tap, right? Eventually they're
well,
going
that's a point I make. It's not that it's easy, but if someone comes at you at a pace that's harder than what you intend to do. I mean, good example. I was training last night. I'm coming back from a little neck issue and I'm training. It's fine, but I'm being a little mellow right now. I'm not being super, super intense. This young buck, 25 years old, a studly kid and pretty good, pretty good jujitsu. he did what young people do. He came at me really hard. And, I could have matched that. I could have, had the ego. I'm a black belt. I better tap this kid. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to let him do his thing. I'm going to play defense. I'll defend. I'll whatever. And we had a really nice exchange, even though he had a little different idea, I think, about how that role was supposed to go than I did. But I didn't allow him to pull me into this higher intensity when I'm not training like that right now.
And it's funny, everybody's experience is different. I remember, I think it was Lex Friedman conversation with John Danaher. You've probably heard this yourself, but
Mm.
he was talking about how young guys come in and they roll with uh, who's the guy, Gordon
Gordon
Ryan, and
Ryan.
right, and they submit Gordon Ryan in practice, and they leave there feeling very full of themselves. And
Yeah.
Danaher says, "Listen, Ryan was like trying to drill a new move, or he was trying to put himself into incredibly deep water, and to see how respond. If you think that's what's going to happen, if you were ever to get on the mat with him in a time that mattered, it would be a completely different story."
Right.
Um,
Yeah, he trained when he was competing, he trained 6 days a week, I think he said, twice Monday through Friday, and then he would train once on the weekends or something like that. And he said, I can't push all that hard when I train. I'm just training. I'm just, working technique. So yeah, that's how you get good. More intensity sometimes is the answer, but it's oftentimes it's not the answer.
Um, you said something, Coach Ellis, that made me remember something in the book that is another good thing for us to talk about because we're talking about this like tame your ego thing, and you talk about how when you're older, um, when you get a blue belt, you think you got to dominate all the white belts, and when you're a
Yeah.
purple belt, you got to beat everybody who's a blue belt and below, and you got to be able to beat brown belts too. And I would love to hear your comments on that because I think you articulate that really well in the book, and it's a lesson that's really valuable for people who are in martial arts to hear. I think if you're older or younger, I think it's a valuable
Mhm.
lesson.
Well, it's the idea of perfect belt representation. You get a blue belt and there's pressure. You might not feel worthy of that belt the day it's tied around your waist, but give it a couple years and you'll be comfortable in that new belt. But that new belt brings urgency that you now have to perform at this higher level that you've been promoted to. And jujitsu is a meritocracy. It's a live art. We spar. And we spar with everybody. We spar with people that are 20 pounds heavier, 20 years younger. We come in all shapes and sizes. And so this idea of perfect belt representation it's just destructive because what it does when you come up short, and you'll always come up short from that metric, is you will leave the academy feeling a little bad about your game. Your ego will try to tell you that you are your performance, that if you sucked, it's because you suck, or that your worth is correlated to your performance or and all that. So you have to let it go. You have to just understand that the belt ultimately is just a representation of you versus the old you. It's just, are you a blue belt compared to the guy that walked in the door 2 years earlier? Are you a purple belt versus the guy that came in 4 years ago? And that's really the only metric that matters. And, some people think there shouldn't be belts in jujitsu. And, the belts, I think overall it's a net positive because it's accountability, right? The belt rep is it's sort of accountability made visible. But the downside is again this idea that you're going to always represent it perfectly. And I'm a black belt and I don't have nights where I can tap everybody. This is life. It's just reality. And we have to just accept it.
I'm gonna give a couple thoughts on the belts, not just in BJJ, but overall. Um, because Sense Legacy and I've talked about this, and I'd love to hear from the other senses how they feel about the belts. Specifically, what's the benefit, what's the negative, right? Like because I do think there are pros and cons, and I do agree with you, Coach Ellis, that I do think they're a net positive. Like I think they're a net positive, especially in places where I guess I'm going to just say they're pressure tested, right? Like it's not you didn't get belts because you just showed up or you signed a contract on the first night that you showed up that you would be a black belt on this day as long as you paid enough money. And to me, that's the negative side of the whole belt system is when people use it as a business wedge to generate more revenue for their facility. And I'm not, whatever, I guess if you're paying for your house and your car, and then I don't want to be too critical of you, but I do think that those types of situations causes some confusion in the martial arts world where it's like, well, he's a black belt and he's a black belt. You're both black belts. And that's where in the inside we're like, yeah, we're not both black belts. Like not the same types of black belts, right? But on the positive side, obviously like motivation, people like unlocking new opportunities to learn new things, right? Like a scaffolded approach, being able to be safe and know where you are when you walk in the room. I think that's a really important thing. But I want to throw up first to Sense Suino. What do you think the positives and negatives of the belt systems are um, overall? You can make it about BJJ if you want, or judo, whichever art you want to go into, Suino Sensei.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a avid hobbyist in BJJ, so I'm not going to really comment with any expertise on that, but I've been involved in the other martial arts for many decades, and I've actually learned a lot from being on this show over the last however many years, 5 years, and listening to other people talk about belt ranks, especially Hanshi Legacy. So I'm not going to go too deep into it because I would like to hear his response. Um, uh, Positives and negatives. Positives, it helps organize the dojo. It gives people something to shoot for. Um, Lets you know who's, you know, most often getting kind of longer than you in the dojo and not as long as you. Um, Role models to look up to. I certainly think one of the negatives is people that focus just on the belt. That's fine, but I don't think it should be your whole motivation for training. And one motivation I get, and one negative that comes up from time to time, is the occasional person who gets so locked into the idea that, oh, I started, you know, 3 years and 2 months ago with the following 8 people, and I didn't get promoted at the same speed they did. That's a negative, and there's always good reasons for that. But yeah, I'd love to hear what Hanchi Legacy has to say about belts in the dojo.
Let's hear Sensei Legacy positives and negatives about
You
rank
put
and
a lot
belt.
of you put a lot of pressure on me here.
Hmm.
Actually, I agree with a lot of things that were already said. Belts are outward expectations. You know, like people look at you and they expect something from you, whereas your sensei is the only one who really knows the value of that belt for you. And it also depends on the time in that belt, right? And sometimes it boosts your ego a little bit. Uh, if you're like having a hard time, say you're a young person and you're having a hard time, and because they don't really know where they stand, like new young white belts, and you give them a different color belt, sometimes it gives them confidence and a little bit of a boost, and they do better after that. But I think uh, when Funakoshi went to Japan and introduced karate to Japan, there was an influx of students. Like there were a lot of students there, and there were no belts in karate. So Funakoshi went to Jigoro Kano and talked to him, and Jigoro Kano said, "The belts are really for the sensei to know where the students are, so that he doesn't he has an easier time of teaching certain sects and different people um, the art." So I think all of it that we're saying is right. But also, I think in karate, the original thing was so the sensei would know where his students are and where he could just start teaching them from. And the discovery, in a way, in martial arts is never about belts, it's about the time in belts. Because karate, you can't experience something unless you've been in that belt long enough. You know, you you're not going to discover that this can. You have to learn. You have to have a certain knowledge to ask more questions. Is what I'm trying to say. And unless you've been in that belt long enough, if you haven't really trained time and grade, you won't be disclosed those new avenues. And it's like we have to rediscover the martial art for ourselves. So,
That's kind of what Coach Ellis said. You got to learn the lessons for yourself. Right at the beginning of the show, he said that, and
yeah, I right away that hit me. Right,
yeah,
that yeah.
yeah. To put a button on the belt thing, and then I'll let you actually, Coach Ellis, put the last button. I do have another question, but which is going to take us maybe in a bit of a different direction. But one thing I like about the BJJ belt system is that, and maybe it's changing now, but in the club that I go to, you got to wait. You have to wait. Like it's not. You just have to wait. You got to put your time in. Like there's a lot,
Yeah.
and like you said, it was 14 years for you to get a black belt. I'm really proud of that in Sense of Legacy School. It takes people like somewhere between 6 and 8 years to get a black belt underneath him. Suino
Mhm.
Sensei, I think I waited for 10 years in Iaido before I got a showdown from you. And I think that's good, and I think that's appropriate. I think having to wait for belts is a good thing. And then you always feel like you earned it. You always feel good when you get it if you had to wait
Mhm.
longer, in my opinion. Anything you want to say,
Yeah.
Coach Ellis, to put a button on all this?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Um, there's always some imposter syndrome in the martial arts, right? You get a new belt and you don't feel worthy of it. What's funny is I trained a style of Japanese jiu-jitsu before I started Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and they didn't spar in that art. And there were way bigger egos in that room than in something like jiu-jitsu, where we're being tested every day, and you can't hide. You can't hide behind that rank the way you can in an environment where you're not really sparring. And I think that those egos were probably fueled by imposter syndrome, thinking, am I really this belt? Can I really represent this belt? Or maybe a little hubris or whatever, whatever fuels that. And I think there's a grounding when you're being tested every day on the mat, because the mats are truth and the mats don't lie. And we love to lie to ourselves. Our ego loves to prop us up. And in the real world, you can walk around faking it in a way because we're not tested in other domains. But on the mat, you've got to perform. And so waiting a little bit for that belt, it gives you a little more time, a little more wisdom. There's lessons in there too that you can't get quickly. You can show up to class every day and you're putting in the time, right? In a compressed period of time, you've gained the skill. But I don't think there's this direct a correlation between the depth and the wisdom you get having to be at a rank for a while. It gives you more chance to think about it and observe and think about, what does this belt really mean and what are the lessons, and all those things, versus just getting a belt quickly.
Love all that. Um, I'll share with you that when I joined BJJ, before I would get out of my car to go into the gym, and I never told anybody I was a martial artist when I went to the gym. I just went. Oh, did we lose Coach Ellis? Oh, no, he's
No,
back.
I'm here. Now I'm
Okay.
here.
No, your screen maybe froze up for a second there, but
Mm.
um, as I would get out of my car to walk to the door, I would just say, "You're a white belt." Like, go in, nothing, you're a white belt. So,
Empty cup.
empty cup.
Mhm.
It didn't take them long to figure out that I had done martial arts for a while, but anyway, I didn't tell anybody. Um, the question that I have now for you, Coach Ellis, which is one that I think everybody will have some opinions on it, and I think it will be a good discussion, is, I like how you frame this up in the book. I don't want to give everything about your book away. I want people to read it, but
Mhm.
what actually gets better with age? in your martial arts training? What do you think? Um, you know that as you age, these things just have to get better. And when you're younger,
Yeah.
you probably can't learn these lessons as a younger person in martial arts. You actually have to be older to learn them. Besides, it hurts. Okay,
Right, right, right. There's definitely more soreness, that's for sure. You know, when you're older in jujitsu, maybe not in you're in your 40s, okay, you're not so far off of your prime. You can still do some things, but 50s, that's changing, 60s, that's changing. There's really no pathway to success in something like jujitsu short of developing killer technique when you're older. When you're young, you can shortcut it. You don't need a perfect arm bar. You can just muscle it. You can use speed to overcome technical deficiencies. You dive into that technique, that finishing technique. You just do it with 100% intensity. Sometimes that's all you need to be successful, even though your mechanics aren't that great. But as your body slows down, as your max heart rate gets lower, as your joints get less elastic, the machine is just not that capable. Then you realize I need perfect mechanics in order to be successful. And that becomes a real interesting field of study, I think, digging really deep into the technique and trying to figure out, okay, where really is the leverage? Where's the point of leverage? Where's the balance point? You're trying to get to the essence of that thing so that you can then be successful against people that have better attributes than you or younger. So I would say that you can continue to develop technically as you get older. I don't think there's a limit to how far you can go technically. Of course, at some point, you're not going to have we need a machine to be able to express jujitsu. And at some point, you're not going to have a machine that's going to be able to do a whole lot. But hopefully that's pretty far down the road. And with good, consistent training, focusing on technique, I think that that's something that can improve as you get older.
I love that. And when you said that in the book, what it did for me, Coach Ellis, was
Mm.
yeah, just because I don't dominate a younger, faster, stronger person doesn't actually mean that their jujitsu is better than mine. Because my
Right.
jujitsu can technically be better than theirs, and that's a measure of actual skill. The fight is the fight, right? Like the fight is sometimes something different. You can win not having good jujitsu, basically. Um,
Yeah. And it's funny now that I've been a black belt for a little while. Um, you can feel people's techniques. I'm very attuned to that. And oftentimes, even though it can be a tough battle, maybe I'm on the run, maybe I'm getting, they're getting the best of me, but you can feel that it's not with killer technique. It's just they're bringing a Porsche to the race, and you've got this 1970 Ford truck that you're driving around, and it's just not as capable.
how about you, Sensei? What do you think it's better with age that a young person just can't get? They actually have to get old to get it.
Yeah, yeah, I love Coach what you said about refining your technique and finding leverage points. We think in Iaido so much about structure, how you create power and balance, and really, it's the same scaffolding, just collapsed into a much smaller space in jujitsu, and then instead of in kind of straight lines, it's done in complex DNA sequences, right? But I love that idea that you can get better and better technically. I think as long as your mind works, your powers of observation can deepen. And I say observation, I don't just mean with the eyes. So much information comes from the tactile side of jujitsu. Um,
Mhm.
and then for me, what's been really dramatic in the last, I don't know, 5 years of my training in all areas is my patience, is
Mm.
the willingness to engage and not make decisions as quickly and let the information come to me. I don't even know quite how to explain that because it happens, it happens in BJJ, it happens in judo, it happens in karate to the limited extent that I understand that. Um, the more patient I get, the less expectations I have when I go into a combative form of whatever art I'm doing. The more lessons I take from it, and I think the more profound the practice is. So at least for me personally, that's the kind of thing that's been top of mind for a bit.
Mm.
Since Legacy, what do you think? what gets better with age? What's something that only older martial artists can know that younger martial artists can't?
Just experience. Like, that's what it all works down to. It's built on each other, good experience. But what I like to say here right now is that we're at a point where um, Sensei Ellis has said this several times, killer techniques. Whereas I've always had a problem in karate, um, in the difference between karate jitsu and karate do. So would that be the same difference as judo and jujitsu? Is there a similar difference there? Whereas um, do would be a more of a modern day, have a different mind than before the last war, because the post-war of actually having to killing people, no mind for serious injury or killing an opponent. Like, where is the line drawn? And is there a difference between judo, jujitsu, and karate do and karate jutsu?
Okay, before you ask that question, Sensei, I just want to finish the thought on being
I'm
old.
sorry, I
Yeah,
got
I
lost.
want to finish wrap that up on being older. Um, and the only thing I want to say is I think as an older martial artist, when you go in, even if you go in as a beginner, you know yourself probably a little better than the younger athletes who go in. They're not really sure of themselves yet. They haven't tamed their ego yet. You know, they're kind of still trying on new suits all the time. Do I want to be an athlete? Do I want to be an academic? Do I want to be Whereas as an older person, when you go in, you already know yourself. You've already failed a lot of times at a lot of different things and had to pick yourself up and do it again. So I think as an older athlete, it's one of those things we can do. We can fail and then get back in there and do it again. As long as our arms and legs aren't broken, then we're good to go again.
Mm.
Um, but since legacy, so your question to that's to Coach Ellis is there a difference between, I guess, the application of an art in real life as opposed to on the mat when we're training it? Am I getting to the nature of your question? Or is it specifically
It's,
judo versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
no, it's a military art,
Mm.
right? Did they invent judo to wrestle around uh, on the mats, or was it invented for a deadly purpose? Like he keeps saying, killer technique,
Mm.
and
Mm.
I hate to say it, but that's the difference between a military art and a sport.
Mm.
And what I'm trying to do here is because I have some of my friends who are karate people, and I tell them that karate jutsu is different than karate do.
Mm.
If you know karate do, you do not necessarily know karate
And
jutsu.
what is that difference? Can you articulate what that difference is?
I absolutely can. After after the Second World War, when karate moved from Okinawa to Japan, Gichin Funakoshi was there and started to teach karate. And why is he called the father of modern day karate, where karate was started way before him? And now karate is for health and self defense.
Mm.
In the days during the war, when they used karate, they killed people. They buried, and during some of the wars between Okinawan and Japanese, they would kill people on the beach and bury them in the sand because it was easy to put them there. So when you take self defense nowadays, do you do you take it with the idea of killing your neighbor, or do you take it with the idea of defending yourself
Right.
with no intent of killing your neighbor? There's a very big difference there because going in, it's for self defense in karate do, whereas karate jutsu, the full idea when you made contact with the enemy was to destroy him because you didn't want him to get back up and kill other people. It was a war.
Mm.
So, Coach Ellis, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, my mind goes to, the invention of BJJ was for a smaller person to be able to defend themselves. There was
Mhm.
no sport BJJ when it was started. It was
Right.
actually a self-defense system.
Well, really, it was old school judo. Judo has lost the newaza over the years. It used to be, I think, and you guys can speak to, or Nicholas can speak to this more as a judo black belt. But once it became an Olympic sport, especially, then that the ground game kind of got lost. And when Mitsuyo Maeda went to Brazil in the early 1900s to share what was judo, and as the story goes, and these are in some ways they're like fish stories. You don't know if they're where reality starts and ends in those stories. But as the story goes, he was prohibited from fighting challenge matches by his sensei, Jigoro Kano. And so he called himself a jujitsu fighter instead of a judo fighter, and he changed his name to Count Koma, or he went by that name, so that he could go do challenge matches. But fundamentally, what he was teaching was a judo that, at least in a sporting context, right, a challenge match, there's still some rules of engagement there, and there's a goal there for the challenge. And so taking your opponent to the ground in that context makes a lot of sense. It's one opponent versus one opponent. You don't have multiple attackers and all those considerations. And so I think that the Brazilians really latched onto the ground game because they saw that once you take someone to the ground, you eliminate 50% of their movement options. Now you can dominate them, and they really started refining that. They took what was already there and built upon it. But I think fundamentally, these are combat arts. They're designed to be able to incapacitate or kill somebody. The fact that we use them now as a vehicle for self-improvement and for learning some deeper life lessons is very interesting and very powerful. And I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that these are combat martial arts. In jujitsu, there's always the debate: sport jujitsu versus self-defense style jujitsu that takes into account that punches might be thrown. And when I ran my school, we had MMA gloves. We had a big bin full of MMA gloves, and occasionally we would put them on. And you're not trying to hurt anyone, just some taps just to keep it honest. And your jujitsu changes real fast when punches are being thrown, and you can get very lazy about sort of managing the range and all those things when you're just thinking sport. Um, so I feel like I'm just meandering. I don't know if I
No,
said
that
anything.
all makes sense to me, Coach Ellis. The thing when since Lacey was asking about, because I've never done karate do, I've always done karate jitsu. The more, and it's always been ingrained in me that when you're fighting in the dojo and we're training, there has to be martial merit in your techniques. So, you're not going to ever come into a Legacy Shorin-ryu dojo and see people like, doing these kind of weird kind of back fist things. We stand in a very practical stance and deliver techniques with power and focus, techniques designed to, basically end the exchange, even though the exchange goes on. Um, so it's hard for me to relate to the side that's the sport side of things.
Mhm.
Um, but in jiu-jitsu, I know I was standing at a tournament once with Professor Brito, who's in Canada. He's kind of the leader of Jiu-Jitsu for Life, our overall association. And he was watching some of the sports stuff. And I was actually standing there with Sean Benson. And he said to Sean, when I watch some of this, it just seems like it's gone so far away from a person being able to defend themselves. And it's just really been developed within the rule set of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Um,
Can I quote Roy Dean?
yeah, sure.
He said that the competition game is very sophisticated answers to very sophisticated questions
Right.
that never get answered never get asked on the street.
That makes sense.
And so it's an intricate game where it's like a zero sum game where every year competitors are saying, okay, how did we lose last year? Oh, there's that technique that, we got caught with. Let's engineer a solution for that. And yeah, you can get very far removed from the reality of self-defense, even though it's beautiful. The expression is intricate, it's complicated. The leg game in jiu-jitsu is very complex, and some of the setups and the techniques, they're beautiful and they're incredible, but they don't have a lot of relevance to, some guy throwing a haymaker at you because you stepped on his toe in the bar or something.
Right. Right. But it is interesting too because I think I don't know what the time, I guess it's slightly different for everybody, but a thought that I'm having as we're talking about this is, let's say by the time I had been in karate for 10 years, you know, you could probably handle most people, untrained people. Like if you
Mhm.
see them coming and you're prepared and you're managing the time and the distance, those people don't really stand much of a chance um, against a trained martial artist when they see them coming. Like, I'm sorry if you're watching this and you feel different. You're just wrong. Um, you're not going to beat a trained martial artist who's
Mhm.
trained properly. But yet we still continue to train. Like, even though those questions are not being asked of us every single day, we still continue to train. And I think sometimes it's not always because of sport. It's just because of the challenge of trying to like continually refine and make something different. And then sometimes you get too far away from it, which is why I think it's good to do a martial art that is more practical based because that's your baseline. And then when you get too far away from it, you can come back to your baseline because you've always got that for your self-defense side of things. But I think if you go in and you just do sport, martial arts, sometimes I think you're putting yourself in a spot where it's like cosplayer, you're living some fantasy that the bad guy's not going to participate in your fantasy of how you think the altercation is going to go, right? Like
Yeah.
they don't care that you're a
Well,
black belt.
especially if you're not sparring in that art, because then, it's just kata. You're not developing timing and reaction time and all those things. But even in something like jujitsu, if all you're doing is training sport jujitsu, you're still training against guys that are trying to strangle you. They're trying to snap a limb. They're trying to do things to you. You're still developing the attributes, the timing, the sensitivity, all those things in a sporting context. What you lack is maybe some distance management and some things that are going to help you when punches are being thrown. But I don't think that distinction is quite as big as some people make it out to be, that if you train jujitsu at a sporting oriented school, you're going to be woefully unprepared for self-defense. No, you're probably going to be okay. But these things are not quite as extreme as people make them out to be.
I agree
But
with you. Yeah, if I think if you fought an Olympic karate practitioner who
right,
I think you and you'd never trained before, I think they're gonna kick your ass pretty bad. Right?
right.
Yeah. Srinos, I'd say you haven't said too much about this topic. You got anything rolling around in your brain?
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the historical development of judo, just in 2 points. Um, One is, a big part of the reason why we have this idea of judo versus jujitsu and karate do versus karate jitsu is because of the whole, the whole shift around, as Hanshi said, Funakoshi Sensei, but also Kano Sensei, um, and not coincidentally, the occupation powers have said you can't do this militaristic stuff anymore. You got to, you got to stop doing martial arts. And so the sometimes it was just a matter of rebranding, right? Presenting the martial arts now and saying, oh no, these aren't jitsu, we're not fighting. These are do, these are ways of personal development. A lot of the same techniques, slightly different philosophical approach. And as part of that, when sport judo started to rise, as Coach noted, right, that was a historical continuation of the de-emphasis of ground techniques, which
Mhm.
partly led to BJJ, but also led to, you know, up until about 20 years ago, a lot of judo players did their groundwork, even though they had Kansetsu Waza and Newaza, were not great at grappling. That's changing because of BJJ and other things.
Mhm.
But if you go, interestingly, if you go back to a lot of the kata, Koshika no kata, and some of the other judo kata that are very high level and very obscure for most people, a lot of those techniques are directly tied to how you moved when you wore armor on the battlefield because you had to move in very
Mm,
restricted ways with a lot of weight. And it can seem very academic until you have a very high level teacher explaining it to you and showing you how it works. Randy, you'll know this from our visits with Sato Tadayuki Sensei, who's a professor at martial arts at Meiji University. Phenomenal ability to explain the techniques, show you where they came from historically, how they were used when armor was on, how they are in the kata, and then kick your ass with them. It kind of brings everything together. I think the
mm,
martial arts are really big, right? Every martial art is a really big world to live in, and
mm.
it's very hard to to do all the parts of all martial arts, even in a lifetime.
True that. True that.
Does Legacy, any final thoughts on that? Like that was a great topic. So, hey, you want to put a button on any of that?
No, I think all the explanations were really good. There was uh, the thing in karate though is except for not making contact, it's very hard to not hurt somebody seriously with a person who learns how to do karate properly, like uh, with a classical sense. And I think the difference really is intent. Is
Mm,
intent. If you use karate, you know, to train in a dojo for health and self-defense, it can be used for that as well. But it takes more than just a normal person to want to punch somebody in the head and take their lives. It's, um, you wonder, well, when would that happen? How about if you're a police officer and you've got a gun and some young guy is trying to harm a family? He has to overcome that. He has to overcome himself and do what's necessary and possibly shoot and take that person's life. There's a lot of psychology in using karate jitsu. You have to be able to face, like a lot of people can say, oh, yeah, I'm a black belt. I can go out and I can fight in the street. And they may just get scared by um, some good street fighter and never be able to even throw a punch. It takes more than just throwing a deadly punch to face somebody and be calm enough, to hit them with a punch that's going to take their lives.
mm.
There's a lot of difference there as opposed to, getting into a high school fight or facing a guy with a knife.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Sensei.
Mm,
I even, the situation. I know for me personally, as a more seasoned martial artist, like my second BJJ tournament, I got somebody in an armbar and he wouldn't tap, and I just let him go because
mm,
it wasn't worth it to me to bust his arm to get. And I gotten crap from my coaches. They were like, "No, you break his arm next time, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to break this guy's arm." But I can tell you, if it was in a bar situation and somebody was bothering my family and we got in a scuffle and I got him on the ground, I know myself well enough to know that you're getting a broken arm, buddy, and probably more than that, right? So I think the location of where things happen and the way you trained are important context that as we talk about this topic. Um, but we're getting along. I knew this would happen. Like we're only got 19 minutes left in this conversation before we got to end this, and I knew this was going to happen, Coach Ellis, because our flow is very good. It was very good the first
mm,
time, and I knew it was going to be good this time, and if we have the chance again, I think it will be good again. Um, I'm really interested in your Old Man Grappler Summit. I'm really interested on how that started, your the brainchild for that, how it's been going. I'd like to hear about it, the location, the instructors you have,
mm,
participants, how you set the age limit. And I'll tell you a funny thing is that Robert, um, my student since he was 5, um, at that time. I wouldn't take students until they were 7, and his parents lied to me about his age, and then he got in. And we've been talking about Suino Sensei and Benson and I have been talking about coming to your Old Man Grappler Summit. And Robert's like, I'd really like to go. And I'm like, well, you lied about your age once before. I can't remember, Robert. How old are you? And he's like, I'm 33. I said, when you're 5 saying you're 7, it's a little different than when you're 33 saying you're 40, right? So, but anyway, the
We
question
do make
is,
exceptions. So, and usually it's the scenario that you describe. Someone will reach out to me. They're like, "Hey, three guys from my school want to go. We're all over 40 except this one guy. Can you make an exception?" And so it seems like at every camp we do, there's always someone in their 30s, and they're always great. We always say, "Yeah, just be chill. Be train appropriately, and it's fine." So we would probably make an exception for him. Just have
that's
the
awesome. So
trifecta.
then, yeah, we can make him go get us coffee and stuff like that too, since he's
Right.
young.
And then, or he can be the uke. We just beat on him. And
This conversation is going exactly in the right direction
there
because
was a guy,
Robert will like.
what's funny is there was a guy named Junior. He was our token the token 40-year-old. He was 30 something that came to a couple events ago. And that was a running joke during the event because I kept calling him up. I kept using him as a demonstration partner and all this stuff. So
I love it.
that
So
tends to
anyway,
happen.
though, Old Man Grappler Summit.
Yeah.
Tell
Old
us all
Grappler
about it.
Summit.
The location, who you get to teach,
Yeah.
what the
Well, it
environment's
was
like.
it was an idea I had. I used to run a school and I moved to San Diego. And, I go back and forth on this idea of do I want to run a school again? I love it. Oh, I'm getting old. There's all this stuff. And so I thought, well, I wonder if there would be a market for a gathering of guys over the age of 40 to get together and train some jujitsu over the course of a weekend. And so I did the first one. Um, it was not an all-inclusive. It was, you fly yourself to San Diego, you get your own accommodations, you're just buying a ticket to the event, and that ticket gets you into the welcome party. We have our social event the first night, so that everyone gets to know each other, and then we train all weekend, and it was a success. It sold out really fast. We did three or four more of them with that format, and they all sold out. And then I thought, well, let's see if we can scale this a little bit because my vision for this was to make it an all-inclusive event where we're all living together, where we're training together, we're talking, we're hanging out, it's more than just we're here for the training. And so we ran our first event at that scale last October at a place called The Oaks, which is a 240-acre luxury retreat center about an hour outside of San Diego in the mountains. And it's gorgeous. The facility's beautiful. They've got a swimming pool and, the grounds are amazing. And so we, brought in a big matted area. We had to put it in a tent outdoors. So we were training outdoors, which was really great. The weather was amazing. It's always amazing down here in San Diego. So, uh, and it was great. It was incredible. People had a great time. Our next one is coming up in May. Huron Gracie and Javier Vasquez are going to be instructors of that one. The October event, I just got done securing Nick Albin, Chewy, Jitsu, who you've probably seen on YouTube. So
Watch his stuff all the time. Yeah.
he's going to be the featured instructor at our October event. So I'm starting to cultivate, some bigger names and bringing them in. And it's just great. It's just a chance for like-minded guys to get together, get some really great training in. It's compressed, and we do a lot of training over the course of those days. And then just the bonding time and everything. And one of the things that I hear a lot from participants is, sometimes when you're over 40, over 50, you might be the oldest guy at your school. Now that's starting to change a little bit. I think a lot of people are starting to get into jujitsu later. But at a lot of schools, if you're the oldest guy, you don't have a good reference point for how good you are because everybody's younger than you. Everyone's got your number. So to come out to an event like this and these guys are rolling with people their age and they're like, man, my game holds up. I'm actually in this room. I'm actually okay. I'm doing okay. So it's a good boost to the ego, and it's a chance to just recharge. I heard from people, they're like, man, I haven't even touched my phone all weekend. This is like a reset, just is such a beautiful environment. And man, if you guys wanted to come out, it seems like people come from all over the place. We've had people from Canada come out, people from Europe, all across the United States, and all that. So we would, be thrilled if you guys wanted to come out.
I know it's gonna happen. Like, when we do this podcast, there's often people I've trained with many times, or we have trained with them many times. And then there's people that come on and you're like, hey, I want to train with you someday. And you're like, but, you know, no, I'm for
Where?
sure, I for
Yeah.
sure, like, this is something that has been discussed repeatedly amongst our crowd that we got to get out there and train at your event.
Mhm.
I really want to
Yeah.
come out there. What does a typical day look like for people when they're like, let's say so you
Mm.
do the meet and greet on
Yeah.
the first night.
So, well, that was the old format. Now that it's an all-inclusive. So, um, the training, typically we do morning training, and it's 2 sessions kind of back to back with a coffee, cookie, refreshment break in between. So it's like going to a seminar. It's a couple hours in the morning. Now, we have yoga before that. You can do some yoga in the morning. You can have coffee, whatever. And then we do our morning training. Then lunch. After lunch, free time, it can look anything however you want it to look. If you want to take a nap, if you want to go on a hike, if you want to play some tennis at the tennis courts, if you want, whatever, it's your time. Or we train in the afternoons for those people that are a little more hardcore that want extra training. And it seems like we always get a lot of black belts that come to these events. And so the afternoon sessions end up just being a big share session where everybody brings what they're working on, what's something cool. And we had some amazing guys last time. And I'm excited for this next one because some of the guys, we've got a bunch of black belts that I know that are showing up, and I want them to share because they've got some really good stuff. And then evenings, typically we'll do a Q&A session with the instructors. We'll talk about the plight of being older in jiu-jitsu. We do breath work sessions. We do a cold plunge. We try to just have stuff happening every day. But ultimately, everything is optional. You show up and this ends up being your vacation and it looks however you want it to look.
So when you say the instructional, is it mostly like drilling, or is the free
No,
rolling?
we spar. We do spar, and again, that's totally up to people. Some people are content just watching the sparring. Some people want to jump in and spar. It's just, it's everything's optional, but we do allow some time for sparring in the afternoons as well. Usually the instructors, they have some slots for some privates, so you can take a private lesson from one of the instructors in the afternoons. But yeah, there's definitely sparring for those that want to.
Sensei Sweetener, Sensei Legacy, any questions about the Old Man Grappler Summit?
Tell me a little bit about the food.
Well, we have a caterer and they're very good. And it's if you have dietary restrictions or whatever, they're amazing at taking care of that. And we try to just keep people well fed and good desserts. We have an ice cream sundae one night, or we have whatever. We try to make sure that no one goes hungry.
What's the max attendance for this, Coach Ellis?
Well, the maximum is about 50 people. It's a huge facility. It can actually handle like 119, I think, is the total number that it can actually accommodate. But in this age group, people like a little bit of privacy. They don't want to be crammed in like sardines, four to a room, and all that sort of stuff. So we looked at the layout of all the rooms and we realized, okay, these rooms can be private. These rooms can be shared, but we're limiting it to 2 people. And then there's also some bunk houses. There's like 48 bunk beds, but we're not putting anyone in the top bunks. It's just 2 to a room. We're trying to keep it pretty limited. So when you do the math on all that, it's about 50 people. But it doesn't seem like it's that many in that facility, because it's such a big facility and our mat space is good and all that, it seems a little bit more intimate than that.
I'm just there's a website, is there not? Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Old Grappler Summit.
Yeah, I just want to throw I'm
Yeah,
gonna throw that
oldgrapplersummit.com.
link in the chat for people who might be interested in it. And then we'll make sure that when we post the video permanently that we put that website in there for you. Um,
I appreciate that.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
and
it's always a little terrifying to do these. The smaller events that we did weren't that scary because you can't lose that big. But when you do the math on a 240-acre retreat center and bringing in mats and transportation and all this stuff, it's not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way. So any help promoting, I truly appreciate because we've got to get people to show up, or I'm going bankrupt.
100% Coach Ellis. We have a friend, his name is Hunchy John Therien, and we've watched him operate, and he does two events a year. And his two events, one's in Ottawa and one's in Lévis, Quebec. Suino Sensei and I will be going to that one. And there's 1,800 people from usually like 20 different
Wow.
countries. And they're doing like he's got 36 training floors set up and usually a giant convention center. And you can do
Wow.
BJJ or Kale or Eskrima or Karate or Judo. And the instructors that he brings in are like just the most elite ones. And then that helps Suino Sensei and Legacy Sensei and I because when we try and do our event, that's going to have like 80 or 100 people. We're like, remember Hanshi and remember what he does. We can do this. We can do this 100-person event. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always a little stressful, right? You know? But that
100%.
inspires me to hear that. Okay, Old Grappler Summit Worlds.
Yeah,
You know? And we'll just have, 20 instructors.
100%. I'd like to come do some jitsu, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it for this one because I'm already spoken for on that weekend. But I will come. You're going to see us there. I know you will. Um,
I hope so.
Time is real, Coach Ellison. We're down to we're at the point now in the show. You didn't even get your 10 questions, which is usually you did it on the first one. We gave you the 10 questions. When you're a returning guest, you don't get that. Um, so we end always by going around the horn, talking about our time with you, and then we're going to give you the last word so you can talk about whatever you like. You can plug Old Man Grappler Summit. You can plug your book, talk about the show, Art of Skill, whatever it is. We'll give the last word to you. Um, but yeah, we'll go around the horn now. Sense of Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight, which just flew by, in my opinion?
Yeah, yeah. It was a great time. We hold a lot of the same values. I find that because martial arts, they're on the exterior, like jujitsu, karate, judo, they're all slightly different. But on the inside, we all gain the exact same thing. We all grow in the same way. So, um, hearing some of the things you had to say in that was enlightening and enriching. Makes you a lot richer. So, I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on our show once more. And I'm not sure I will make it there, but it was nice to see you. Thanks for
I
coming.
appreciate it. I appreciate it very much.
Suno Sensei, what do you want to say about our time with Coach Ellis tonight?
Loved it, loved it. Thank you so much for coming back. It just underscores the experience we had the first time. Great
Mm,
connection. Love your thoughts and ideas. I feel like there's a lot of potential. Anything we can do to help support you,
mm.
um, we will do it. Um, I just want to mention some things that got said. The piano doesn't fight back. Uh, you said perfect belt rank representation. I love the concepts that you use that to explain, and I'm going to think about it some more. And then what you said, your teacher Roy Dean said, I'll massacre it, but the competition game is a very sophisticated set of answers to a very sophisticated questions that are never asked in real world self-defense.
Mm,
Those are classic statements. Listen, Coach,
mm.
can't wait to train with you. We're going to find a way to do that sooner than later. And just reach out anytime you need support for what you're doing.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
also
Mm.
go ahead, Coach Ellis.
Oh no,
Sorry.
I was just going to thank him. Thank you. And man, I'd love to come out and hang out with you guys. You have such a great vibe. And you know, it's true that we train different martial arts, but the lessons are the same.
Yeah.
It's all the same stuff. Managing your ego, the self-improvement, the community bonds, the you know, they're this it's just the same stuff. The martial art is just the husk around which we find these life lessons. And it's very powerful. And so to, you know, connect with people, like-minded people that have the same experience, but with a little different martial art. And really, I think those are the lessons you get from tennis or really anything, I think really that you go deeply into.
Agreed, 100%. And when is Crucible, Suno Sensei? When are we doing that?
July 25th.
So if you are anywhere near Ann Arbor, Michigan, Coach Ellis, for July 25th, careful because we're enablers here. We do this.
There could be a hole in my calendar, but the word crucible kind of terrifies me.
Nobody leaves unchanged, Coach Ellis. This is our motto. Nobody leaves unchanged. There's a few rules. You got to agree to come in at 6 a.m. You got to agree not to leave until 6 p.m. unless you leave in an ambulance, which actually did happen one time. Mostly because the person hurt himself. He had a hockey injury. But he actually came back. He went to the hospital and then came back and stayed for the rest of it. You
Mm,
gotta fully try and participate in everything and do what you can with what you got. And then you gotta be supportive to everybody else in the room. And we do 4 hours of striking, 4 hours of takedowns and clinching, and 4 hours of BJJ and groundwork. We do some free sparring, and it always culminates. The last hour is like rounds of rounds of BJJ rolling on the ground. And if you ever want to come, we would love to have you. And
mm,
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm sure Sensasuino would agree with me that you could lead the BJJ section
mm,
for sure. We would love to have you there leading that
mm.
portion of it. Um,
That would be amazing. Let's talk about it.
okay, well, let's talk about it. You say that on your podcast all the time.
Yeah, right. You know what's funny? I never realized that that's what I was doing initially until a friend of mine started mocking me. Every time I'd see him, he'd go, "Hey, Rick, let's talk about it."
Well, I
And
love
I
it.
was-
I love it. And we're going to give you the last word here, but first I got to always thank the people who help us with this. And I want to thank Robert Slumsky, Andrei Sedashev, Justin Shea, Mike Russell, Josh Kitchens, Dan Holland, Jesse Vite Vilo, Christiana Landolt, Stavros Stravulius, Drudy Giuliani. And I know it's not Emily Ruth Driscoll anymore, but I'm still going to thank her for the work she did in the past. Who's the one, Setsuino, that you have helping us now?
Now we have Madison Elizabeth Schroeder.
Thank you to all of you, those people who help us with this podcast. And last word is going to go to you, Coach Ellis, but I do want to say I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. We kind of met randomly just through a cold call. I really appreciate how accessible you've been and how open you've been. And I'm always happy when I see a little comment that you write on one of our things. Makes me feel good. And it's just been a great show. I've just had so much fun tonight. The hour and a half has gone by so quickly. So thank you. And what do you want to say to
Yeah,
wrap up?
thank you. My pleasure. I echo everything you guys said. You guys are really great, good questions, and nice conversation. And I'm really blessed to you know, call you guys friends, and even though we've never met in person. And for those that want to watch my YouTube content, I'm The Art of Skill on YouTube. Old Grappler Summit is my retreat, and Old Grappler Handbook on Amazon if you want to read the book.
Get that stuff.
Got it.
Good night, everybody.
All right, everybody. Thanks,
Yeah.
Coach.